Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special live simulcast of Women of Grace through EWTN television and radio. I'm Johnnette Benkovic. Today is a doozy of a program. Catholic journalist and commentator Mary Jo Anderson is with us, and she's going to be talking about the increasing opposition against the federally backed national education curriculum called Common Core. Wait until you hear the whys and hows of this latest attempt to dismantle education and compromise American students, and what part Washington is playing to make it happen.
We are women of grace round the throne of the Lord Most High. And we lift up our praise from the depths of our souls here at Christ.
It's hard to believe, isn't it, that the federal government would participate in a scheme to dismantle public education, compromise the American student, and go to great lengths to see it happen. But that's what many parents, educators, and state legislators are claiming. Pundits, too, as well as Catholic commentators and journalists, one of whom is today's guest, Mary Jo Anderson. For better than 20 years, she has researched and reported on some of the most provocative issues facing our day and time, ranging from UN conventions to progressive movements in the government and church, to industries that affect the quality of food we eat, to the increasing paganization of contemporary society. Let's welcome Mary Jo Anderson. Mary Jo, it's great to have you with us today.
Johnnette, it is always my great pleasure and honor to be with you.
Well, thank you so very much. This is such an important topic, and I used strong language in the open and also in your introduction, and it's strong language that we can stand behind because the facts are the facts are the facts. Yes. We do know that there are many people that are beginning to suspect that there is something going on with this Common Core curriculum that is in opposition to what is in the best interests of American students, as well as the belief systems of students, and we hope to tackle some of these issues in our program today. But first, I'm going to ask you to define for us what we're talking about when we say Common Core curriculum.
Well, first of all, it's Common Core state standards. And the proponents of Common Core would tell you that it is not a nationalized curriculum. That is one of the talking points. They will say it is simply a set of standards and nothing more. But if you have a set of standards, how are you going to ensure performance that meets the standards? It's impossible to have a set of standards without some sort of correlating material that helps the student achieve that standard. Sometimes I use the illustration of a football team. If you say I'm going to win 8 of 10 games, then you need to change the way the game is played or the plays that you make in order to increase your standards. So there has to be a curriculum. So technically it's Common Core state standards and only a set of standards. But there are multi-million-dollar textbook publishing companies rushing to get out to market the Common Core aligned texts, which indicates we will give you the materials that you need in order to be sure that your students are able to achieve these standards. Then the third prong is assessment. So we have standards. These are the skills that each student must meet to be at grade level, a minimum basic standard. That sounds good to most of us. But here now is the material that will help you achieve the standards, and in order to see if the standards have been met, we now have to test. So there are 3 components: the standards, the curriculum, and then of course the assessment.
Well, it sounds very similar to me, like something that we did programming on in 1994, all the way back in the early days of the Abundant Life series that ran on the network here for 17 years. Our guest was Phyllis Schlafly. It was called Outcome-Based. She is called Outcome-Based Education. Right. And I just want to share with you, friends, that we actually put those programs up on our website for you so you could watch them. And I think that you're going to hear a similar thread running through all of this. So this isn't really new in this attempt to begin to I'm going to use this word, homogenize the American
Right.
student. And I think it's important to also ask ourselves the question, just like outcome-based education, if there's a particular outcome that you want to see, in this case being called a standard, you're going to teach to the standard. The fact of the matter is, your education is only going to be as good as the standard is. And there's no standard that's set without an end goal in mind.
Correct.
Where you want to take those students.
Right.
And all of that is extremely important. And this is why these standards could be a little suspicious and why many people are concerned. And in fact, they have reason to be based on these standards.
The standards themselves are fairly innocuous. If anything, they are substandard. I think the Common Core, it's an unfortunate name because they are fairly common. It is not something exemplary. It's not something we would strive for. They are pretty basic. Even the Common Core proponents will tell you that it is meant to help a student achieve admittance to an average junior college. So it really, I think it's a disservice to parents to believe that somehow this set of standards is going to be better. And we need to point out also that it's never been tested. The earliest adopters were the state of Kentucky and New York. Both have had dismal, really catastrophic results. Now, some would say that's because, see, the standards were quite rigorous, and therefore our students didn't meet them. But on a deeper analysis, it was found that the students, the brothers and sisters, older brothers and sisters of Kentucky and New York students who had come through the old state system of standards could do basic math and English language arts better than those who are now subjected to the Common Core. So it's never been tested. For parents to believe that this new set of standards will somehow make their child more prepared for jobs and careers is in fact not proven at all. And we should hold that in the front of our minds, because when you're being given a sales pitch, the idea here is this will improve your student. We have zero data to prove this.
Well, anytime that you use the word common, I think that there's reason to be suspect, only from the standpoint of what you're pointing out. Because if this is going to meet the needs of all students, then obviously those standards have to be at a level that all students could achieve. There's question about that, though, because not all children can achieve these standards.
Correct.
For varieties of reading. One, just basically the gift of their intellectual capacity. Mm-hmm. But then in addition to that, there's also the student that's coming to us more and more who lives in a home where English isn't spoken, children who have immigrated from other countries. And they've got a whole host of areas of endeavor that have got to come first. So, common is that, but the other concern is what you point out, that your student who has a lot of intellectual capacity is going to be now only based, judged and merited on that, or taught for that standard, which could lead to a type of a dumbing down process where the common becomes good enough. It's good enough.
Exactly. And what is really happening here, and this is important to get our arms around, the families that have always put a premium on education, that means that they reinforce it at home, that they model it themselves as parents or as families, that they make sacrifices to make it possible for their students to go to superior schools, perhaps private schools or parochial schools, to have tutoring, to have all the enrichment. These families, their students will continue to do well, mm-hmm. because they will make that sacrifice. But for the average student, the real problem in America today is not met by Common Core standards. The real problem in America today is the dissolution of the family, socioeconomic fallout, the growing number of single-parent homes, so that what happens is we have dysfunctional families, a direct result, in my view, of literally a generation and a half of government programs that have been wrong-headed. It simply wasn't based on the family and based on the best interests of the child. So now what we're trying to do is we're trying to address cultural failings with an educational standard, but the fly in the ointment is the whole purpose of this is this educational standard is aimed at a workforce-ready population.
Yeah, now that's the end goal. So you know what I
Very
say, these
utilitarian.
standards are all going somewhere, and that's where they're going. They're going to this workforce-ready. Unpack that phrase for us, Mary Jo.
Well, perhaps you remember that that phrase, workforce ready, was really part of Goals 2000. Prior to Goal 2000, as you've already talked about, there was outcome-based education. We could go back and back and back. I want to give a quick sort of reference point because later in the week we will discuss some of this, but at the same time that we had Goals 2000, we were also developing at the United Nations, which is how I came to be interested in the whole Common Core topic, something called the Millennium Development Goals, one of which is universal education. So now we see America moving in the direction of, quote, universal education. Recently I saw on television a famous newscaster talk about the horror, and it is very disquieting for Americans to learn that in the developed world, America's students, high school students at 15 years old, are rated 27th in the developed world for math, or 21st for reading. And of course, that alarms us. Enter Common Core curriculum standards. Here's your standards. We're going to up them so we won't be 27th in math. Remember the old space race? Oh no, we must get to the moon first. Therefore, we will increase our technology. So there is a sense of that, but what's really happening is that those statistics, the 27th and 21st, these are not actual apples to apples comparisons, but it is being used to herd or channel Americans into adopting a nationalized, standardized educational program for workforce-ready populations.
Workforce-ready population, once again, signifies and states something that should concern us regarding the content of the material that is there.
Indeed.
And the math and the English literature aspect of things and the critical thinking skills that are used there really are affected by that end goal to make a workforce-ready population.
Correct. And even at that, what we need to understand is if we were to go back, as you said in the opening, go back to look and see past even Phyllis's observations and past Dewey and go all the way back perhaps to the Huxley family, you will see that there was a sort of a divergence. The secularization of society to eradicate the worldview that understands the human person as body, mind, and soul, of having a spiritual component, that truth and beauty is something that we can know and learn and strive for, rather than, and that it's written into the cosmos for us, rather than this utilitarian mindset that turns the person into simply a plug-and-play worker unit for the economy.
Well, I have to say that we have watched regimes in the past rise and fall based on that notion of the human person. And Holy Mother Church, through our Holy Fathers, has given us numerous documents about the dignity and value of each human person and how any regime, government, or scheme, plan, curriculum that would seek to separate the unique dignity of that human person from their capacity to perform, function, or produce is antithetical to the revealed truth of sacred scripture and God's plan for the human person. And we've seen it over and over again in numbers of, dare I say, Marxism. We've seen that in the whole communist rise and fall. So we're facing very big issues here, and none of them should be taken lightly. And friends, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, more with our guest today, Mary Jo Anderson. Stay with us.
Admissions Bureau.
Welcome back, friends. We're visiting with our guest today, Mary Jo Anderson, and we're talking about a contentious topic. We are. It's the Common Core curriculum that basically is taking the country by storm in our various school districts throughout the United States of America, as well as our state standards. And I have to say, it's entering into our parochial school systems as well. And this should concern all of us. You were pointing out to us prior to our break, Mary Jo, why we should be a little concerned about some of this. And you were discussing with us the fact that the standards are being set to create, if you will, a workforce-ready population.
Correct.
And those terms, you know, that phrase, that concept should really be upsetting for some of us, because as we were saying, it pulls away from the dignity of the human person as irrepeatable and created in God's image and likeness, and makes them really just a cog in a wheel, a very functionary kind of attitude, utilitarian. Basically, what can I use this person for? What can I get this person for? This is even affecting the content of the curriculum that is being written to achieve these goals. And I want you to talk with us just briefly what we're seeing happening to literature classes and what we're seeing happening to math classes.
Well, there are two separate issues that we should quickly review for our listeners. The first, that the standards themselves are not necessarily better than what is already in place in most states. In many cases, they are substandard. The state of Florida, our state, for instance, was evaluated by the Fordham Institute that said, actually, in many cases, Florida had superior standards to the Common Core state standards. So many states are already doing a wonderful job. The problem, however, is that the understanding now is, if you are going to go into the workforce, how much do you really need to know of literature? Do you really need to have known, do you really need to have read Heart of Darkness or Shakespeare or Frankenstein? How about we have instead employee manuals or a computer repair manual? In other words, to take pieces of text out of any particular context, look at them and see if you understand the words and the meaning of these words, but you don't understand their implication in the wider world. You only need to know what's on your computer console. And your ability to have an understanding of man or community or relationships to enhance your life and that of your community and your inner self, your personal dignity, or even your individuality that all Americans cherish so much. All of this is missing. It turns you into a utilitarian functionary that is serving the bottom line of some corporation or state agency, rather than to give children literature. If you can learn to read Shakespeare, you won't have any trouble with a technical manual. Now, in the case of math, I would encourage our visitors to go out onto the internet, particularly on YouTube. You will find, just plug in Student Undoes Common Core, because so many students have come to complain, particularly when it comes to math. For instance, in first grade, a child can get points for having given a good reason and drawn a drawing of what his math problem was. But if he got the computation wrong, he still gets 2 points. Computation's only 1 point. Conversely, the student who has the computation correct and did it the shortest possible way and didn't bother to draw all the little drawings or be able to give a word explanation, a text explanation for how he solved the problem, that student is penalized. So what we have is students moving ahead, where those who can truly compute their math problems are making less score than the child who can get the drawings just right but can't compute. So I recently had a conversation with the superintendent of schools, and his comment was, but I would rather have a student that could understand the fullness of the implication of math than one that simply got the computation right. Really? Whose bridge do you want to drive over? I'll take the bridge that was built by the student who gets his computation correctly.
I will too. I mean, this is what we're facing. This is what we're looking at. This is what is so concerning. You wrote an article, and this article appeared in Crisis Magazine, an online magazine that you write for, a very good one. And I'm going to just hold it up.
Sure.
It's Common Core Sexualizes American School Children. And I want you to talk about this other aspect of how these standards are permitting ideologies, concepts, and moral issues to creep into education without parents being aware of it.
Indeed they are. What is happening is the curriculum that is being designed in order to be Common Core aligned, in other words, to help you achieve the standards that Common Core has set. This material is suggested. It is sometimes called exemplars. They will tell you it's not required, it's just meant to be an example of the level of reading or the complexity of reading that a student should experience at this grade level. The problem, however, is who is choosing? And parents are sort of shuttled aside. And remember, the Catholic principle here is that parents are the first educator of their child and the authority over what that child should be exposed to and at what stage in their lives. All children do not experience the complexities of life at the same age, and only the parent can determine the proper level. But we have, for instance, in this particular article, what has unnerved many parents, and hooray for a very brave mother in the state of Arizona who took her school district to task because Dreaming in Cuban, a book that was recommended for 15-year-olds, 10th graders, is in fact has a graphic depiction of teenagers, underage students, engaging in not only sex, but sadomasochism. Now, this is to be read aloud with 15-year-olds in class, boys and girls. One particular father was so unnerved, he said, even if I opt my child out, because that is what happened. When you go to the school, they say, well, you may opt your child out. You don't have to expose them. But they've already been exposed because I didn't know this was on the list, so now the horse is out of the barn door. But the father said, but even if I opt my daughter out, she will still be going to school with people who've read and taken in this information. But Johnnette, from my point of view, and I'm certain you share this, the real danger is this. When material such as this, and there are many others, there have been books pulled out of the state of New York, pulled from Florida, for various, what we would call pornographic. At the very least, it is age inappropriate for students to be reading this material. But this is what I'm sure we all share. My student, my child should learn some of these issues within the context of their Catholic faith, within the context of the family tradition, not from a teacher that is simply reading a text to them and unpacking it as that teacher or the students on either side of you as they experience it. Mm-hmm. So we haven't laid a foundation for our students to be hit with what is essentially pornography. And here's the key. When your student goes to school and the school presents material like this, the school is essentially saying, giving the child a green light. This culture, this lifestyle, this experience is out there for you.
Yeah.
It sort of endorses it. Even if a teacher is wise enough, and I hope some are, to pull back and say, this damaged this relationship, this damaged the futures of these two teenagers. The fact of the matter is at 15, they're still sort of twittering, ha ha ha, did you read this, did you read that? They're not putting it in the context that a family would give or their faith would give. So I find it very dangerous, very invasive, and I think parents and taxpayers have a right to demand that this be removed. This is no one's family value.
You know, I want to share with you, there is so much to discover when you begin to move into the area of research of Common Core curriculum, and you've done such a magnificent job, and there's so much to cover. I'm so glad we're going to be following this program up with a series on this very topic, because we really do want for you to be informed about it. And certainly this is a live broadcast, and we are looking forward to receiving your calls where you can express your concerns or even your insights about this, maybe even your experiences. I do want to go to another point, though, before we head to the bottom of the hour here, and that is another article that you wrote for Crisis. And this is Common Core Goes Global, and I find it interesting because here's a picture of Bill Gates, and behind him, of course, is the emblem of the United Nations. And there's a connection between Bill Gates and the United Nations and Common Core curriculum that I think is very fascinating, and I think you should share it with us, Mary Jo.
Well, many people know that Bill Gates is a philanthropist. He is one of the world's wealthiest billionaires, and
he's the Microsoft guy.
He is
if
Microsoft.
Someone doesn't know.
And he and his wife have formed the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, among many other foundations. There are quite a few channels through which they donate their funds. But the significant thing for Bill Gates and education in America is simply this. For years, he has been funding educational outreach, principally in Africa, but also in Asia. You can go online and look at the foundation website, and it will actually list the grantees, so you can see the sorts of projects. So it's important to see that he has already had an interest in education for a long time. Now, one could be cynical, and I'm trying not to be, I truly am. I understand that we tend to give our finances in the areas where we have an interest and where we might also see a benefit. In his case, the more countries, even in less developed areas, that begin to use Microsoft programs in their computers to educate their children, of course, if I want to foster that, then I have give my grants to education. Gates was very concerned about the Millennium Development Goals back when the United Nations, as you see in this picture, he's making this presentation at the United Nations. He would like to see a universal, one-size-fits-all education and curriculum for the world, and that's part of the Millennium Development Goals. So he took this idea, and by 2007 he made a presentation to quite a few groups of people and a consortium of textbook publishers and even to the presidential candidates, and just said, I think this is something we very much need to do. To this point, Gates has given in excess of $150 million to the idea of developing a national or a Common Core curriculum based on Common Core standards. Here are the standards. You come up with a curriculum. So I think if Catholics who are aware that Gates is also very much into a eugenic mindset, he is not a friend of pro-life causes, and he understands that there should be a selection process when it comes to who should and who shouldn't get the goods of this earth, then his worldview is very different. Do we want his millions coming in to design the standards and therefore the attendant curriculum that American students, and particularly American Catholic students, are going to receive?
Well, I do want to draw attention to the fact that we did say that one of the outcomes that is looked for through this Common Core is a workforce-ready population.
Correct.
I don't want to tie anything too closely together, but one could say there might be potentially some area there for self-interest. We would like to believe that this isn't affecting our Catholic schools, but in fact we know that it is affecting our Catholic schools. And we just have a minute before we go to a hard break here, Mary Jo, but when we come back from this hard break, I would very much like for us to talk about why we as Catholic parents are not necessarily protected from the Common Core standards entering into the schools where we are paying a lot of money to send our students today.
And making sacrifices.
And making great sacrifices for it. We do want to let you know, friends, that this is a live broadcast and we're looking forward to hearing from you. We're going to give you those numbers by which you can contact us today. Those phone lines are open and they are ready for you. We so appreciate you being with us for this live simulcast of Women of Grace today, being brought to you by EWTN Television and Radio. Want to let you know that this program is going to be available for you through Religious Catalog. You're going to want to get it, share it with your friends and everybody you know. So we invite you to stay tuned. Going to get those numbers up for you when we come back, and more with our guest today, Mary Jo Anderson, on Common Core curriculum. Stay with us. Welcome back, friends. We're visiting with our guest today, Mary Jo Anderson, and we're talking about Common Core curriculum and why you as a parent, a grandparent, a citizen should be concerned about this. We certainly do want to get you out to our website where we've got all kinds of good resources available for you, including those programs that I did with Phyllis Schlafly. We've actually got a hyperlink for you right there on the homepage, so you don't even have to go looking for them. You can just click on them. It's going to be so interesting to see how 20 years later, I mean, here we are, folks, you know. It fascinates me. One of the reasons why we want to invite you to become a Women of Grace exclusive subscriber, because we've got an archive for you there of all of the programs that we've done in the Abundant Life series, even some going back to 1988. Can you imagine such a thing? But they're there for you, and we invite you to get out there and to make use of these archives, because just as we're expressing about this educational topic today, in so many cases, the topics that we've discussed in the past are absolutely as relevant now as they were then. Mary Jo Anderson, you can watch Mary Jo and I from decades ago, as a matter of fact.
Different hair.
Different hair. Exactly. Other than that, we look exactly the same. Nonetheless, you can get out to Women of Grace exclusive and watch these very important programs. So do become a subscriber. It's there for you. We do have a saint this week. Our saint this week is Saint Jean-Baptiste Lassalle. He is actually the patron saint of teachers, and he's a great one because he founded the Brothers of Christian Instruction, and he is an educator par excellence, and many of his educational practices are still in use today. So we want for you to get to know him. We also want for you to ask for his intercession at this moment when education, I think, is in a crisis, and it's only going to loom larger. Guess what? We also want to hear from you. We surely do. Let me give you the number by which you can call us today with your questions or your comments. 800-221-9460. Now, for those of you that are with us by radio, it's different than the one we use on radio, so I'm going to ask you to listen up. It's 800 and it's 221-9460. I'm going to be pumping the number through the rest of our program. If you didn't get it, just stay tuned. We certainly do want for you to give us a call here today. We actually have a caller with us right now, as a matter of fact, and Bob Lord is calling us from Virginia this morning. Good morning, Bob. How are you?
Hi, this is Bob Laird. I'm with the Cardinal Newman Society. Mary Jo and Johnnette, this is a great show. I'm really enjoying it. But, you know, I was thinking about it. You at the bottom of the hour, you mentioned for Catholics, you know, this Common Core thing may be a blessing in disguise for us. Really, it's really providing an opportunity. You know, you were talking about the parents and really the pastors and the bishops to see the importance of not starting off with some state standards and then putting a Catholic twist on it and then calling it Catholic education, but going back to the first principles of our faith and really building a curriculum around that. You know, Mary Jo, you know, the products of Catholic education are outperforming their public school counterparts in just about every means. And why would we want to adapt public school standards, which are substandards, when our standards already exceed that? You were mentioning your articles. We created a website at Cardinal Newman Society called CatholicIsOurCore.org, and on that we have Mary Jo's articles and the Bill Gates stuff. But I wanted to ask, the real question is, Mary Jo, isn't this an opportunity for Catholics to jump on, really look at what our Catholic education's about?
You know, Bob, I think you have a wonderful observation there. This is an opportunity, I think, for Catholic schools to be able to showcase why they're different and how, and why it works better. For years, we've had many people who are not particularly Catholic or even religious want to put their children in our schools. Why? Because, of course, they're seeing the excellence not just in the skills that are acquired and the understanding of the world, but that their student understands themselves in a better, more human way, shall we say. It widens, it gives them wings. So I think Bob, that's really a wonderful observation. I would like to see many of our bishops have the courage to know that Catholics started the university system, that we've been in the education business for more than 500 years and have done it very, very well in the worst of circumstances. Poor economics, no desks, a thatched roof, under persecution. Our educational outreach has gone on for centuries in the worst possible condition, turning out the best possible students. And we do have an opportunity, I think, to showcase that as public education goes one direction and Catholic education remains excellent in its authentic teaching of the whole person, I think that we have a wonderful opportunity here.
Yeah, that's an excellent observation, Bob, and I really do thank you for your call today. And it does bring something up that we do want to discuss for just a moment here, Mary Jo, and that is the fact that unfortunately there are some Catholic schools that are beginning to feel as though there's pressure to adopt these standards, and we don't want to see that happen. We don't want to see the good Catholic standards being jettisoned out of the educational opportunities that are there for our students in parochial education.
Johnnette, that is the case. More than 100 dioceses have already adopted or adapted some degree of the standards and some of the attendant texts and materials and resources. It's important for us to say from the outset that many bishops simply understood this would be the next best thing in education. There was very little time to give it an in-depth review. The same was true for our states, by the way. Florida, for instance, adopted it very quickly because it sounded so good. The sales pitch was good, although no testing had been done. There was no field testing. We didn't really know if this program would work.
Is it buy it before you see it,
Buy
Mary
it before
Jo?
you see it. It is. And many bishops did the same, I think, probably with the concern that if public education is going to do this, we have to be sure that we are up to speed. But many bishops, and I would like to have a shout out to the bishops, many bishops, particularly in the state of Wisconsin, who have begun to say we will not adopt or adapt because we already see now that we've reviewed it, that our standards are already far in excess of Common Core state standards. Yes. So I think more bishops are beginning to review it. And let me just say that there's some wonderful places for bishops to go and to read what is in fact happening. The American Principles Project has a great website that shows sort of the development of the entire idea.
Yes.
And I think that perhaps you know there was a letter that was sent by 132 Catholic professors to the bishops outlining their concerns. So bishops are beginning to sit up and maybe say, let's take a second look.
Where is the National Catholic Education Association on this issue?
Well, the NCEA is not, and we need to stress this, it's not an arm of the USCCB. It's not an arm of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops at all. Just as the National Education Association is for public school teachers, NCEA is the same for Catholics. And they do have an advisory role to school superintendents. They are very much on board with the Common Core. They see their job as creating something called the Common Core Catholic Identity Initiative, which, as we've said earlier, is essentially giving a Catholic gloss to the Common Core standards and the attendant materials.
Yeah. We're going to go to a break in just a minute or so, Mary Jo, but I do want you to comment briefly on the fact that we have to admit that when it comes to the states, many of whom are now beginning to reconsider their initial rush to adopt the Common Core standards and the assessments that go with them, that there's monies tied to this. In other words, there's a lot of federal funding available to school districts if they do adopt. And in many cases, at least initially, the federal government was actually bypassing state legislators and going directly to school districts to negotiate dollars and cents with them for adopting. What do we say about that?
It's very complicated. It has many crevices and nooks and crannies, but a general overview would be this. The No Child Left Behind had problems. The current administration said, we will give you, but it's law, but we will give you waivers if you instead you will do this or that. And they created something called Race to the Top. You get Race to the Top funding from the federal government, each state does, if you agree to adopt Common Core state standards. So the difficulty here is, while it's, quote, optional and every state is free to choose to participate or not, and therefore it's not national, the truth is, particularly in a failing economy, many states were scrambling for money, and this Race to the Top grant money was only available if you took Common Core. So how free was that?
Not very, I don't
Not
think.
very.
We're going to go to a break. When we come back, more with our guest today, Mary Jo Anderson, talking about Common Core curriculum. And we're going to go to our phone lines again. We invite you to give us a call, and the number for you is 800-221-9460. That's 800-221-9460. We're going to be right back. Stay with us.
That's right. This is my math class.
Welcome back, friends. We're visiting with our guest today, Mary Jo Anderson, and we're talking about a very serious topic. And that topic has to do with the Common Core curriculum standards that are being adopted by many states, and I have to say also into some of our diocesan Catholic schools as well. We have concerns about it, and we're airing those concerns with you today, but we're not alone. There's many state legislators that have concerns about it. Some of our federal officials, our congressmen, and some of our senators are also weighing in on it. We've got educators very unhappy about it, and no small number of parents either. We're trying to give you some of the background on that today. We're going to go to our phone lines right now. We invite you to give us a call, 800-221-9460. That's 800-221-9460 is the way in which you can reach us today. And I thank you very much for your phone calls. Hey, Kathy from Birmingham. How are you today, hon?
Good, Johnnette. Thank you for taking my call, and I wanted to thank you both for getting these topics out in front of both your audiences through the internet and podcasts and EWTN. We're so grateful. We're here,
thank you.
We're listening, and we're trying to push it outward too. But
Good.
I had a question. How can we locally, in a charitable way, and the terms, I'm trying to find the words, push back on some of this without drawing attention to ourselves, say our local school boards and teachers, because it puts them on the defense, and then it doesn't make the matter better. And then the other question I had was, how are Catholic homeschoolers affected by the Common Core?
Two excellent questions, Kathy, and I'm going to turn to my expert, Mary Jo, for the answers.
Well, first I'll do it in reverse order. The Catholic homeschoolers will eventually be affected simply because the assessment tests, ACT and SAT, will require that even the homeschooled student that wants to apply to colleges take these tests. Some of these test questions may well reflect material that was in the Common Core aligned texts. That also hasn't been tested yet, so we don't really know how deeply those will be intertwined, but that is the understanding, because someone who came directly from the development of Common Core is now the new president of SAT.
Well, there you
and
have
has
it.
said that he is definitely going to peg the test questions to some of the materials. To your first question, Kathy, it's very important, I think, that parents understand that you are the employer. Your school district is the employee. In many cases, your school board members are elected, and that's where to begin. Elected officials want to be reelected. They want to please their constituents. They understand that they serve at your pleasure, and in the very nicest possible way, we need to remind them of that. Therefore, their doors should be open to you. Most of them are very anxious to at least hear out your concerns. The thing is that you will meet with all kind of stonewalling, and when that happens, you simply smile. We're Southerners. Everything goes with a smile and a bless your heart. And as Catholics, we mean the bless your heart.
We really do mean that part.
We do mean that. And then you're persistent, and it's helpful, I think, to take one or two other parents with you. And then what you do is you simply say, I know that you believe in transparency, and we would very much like to see a materials list for the coming grading period, the coming quarter or 6 weeks, or however the district divides up their marking periods. when they know that the materials list is subject to parental review, they get a little bit nervous and they start shifting in their seat a bit. If they know that, they'll be more careful about the material that they put on the list. So that is the first place to begin. The second thing to do is to insist at some point that a new district regulation, and we have to be careful about rules, policy, regulation versus law. What you want is a policy that says that in the same way that you now go online and see your child's homework assignment, or you go online to see your child's grades, you also want to go online as a parent to your county school board system and look at the materials list for the coming units. That way, a parent can protect their 15-year-old from reading Dreaming in Cuban or Toni Morrison's absolutely horrific The Bluest Eye. This is a book that includes pedophilia, incest, rape. It is ghastly. And yet, because it comes under the heading of ethnicity, and of course Toni Morrison won a Nobel Prize for Literature, it's considered literature. It may be literature, but it is certainly not age appropriate. And when you go to the school board and say, I do not want my child subjected to pedophilia, incest, and rape in a school setting, they have to listen to you. They know you know your stuff.
Yes, thank you very much, Mary Jo, for giving us some guidelines on that, because many parents ask about that. It is important to state, though, that many of these individuals on the school boards and many of the teachers and many of the people that hold these public forums are very skilled in techniques to help to control the crowd.
Yes.
And so when you talk about stonewalling, but I love what you have to say about asking for the material. We have a right to that as the parents of our children. And remember what the church says, the parents are the primary educators of their children. We're entrusting them, and I love the idea about the school board and the teachers working at the pleasure of the people who pay their salaries. Let's go to Christina. She's calling us from California. You are also able to call us too. Let me give you that number. It's 800-221-9460. That's 800-221-9460. If you're in the Birmingham area or somewhere within this area code, 205-271-2980. How are you, Christina?
Great, Johnnette. Thanks for taking my call.
You're so welcome.
My son is in 4th grade at a Catholic school in the northernmost part of the Los Angeles Diocese. The whole diocese is highly promoting core curriculum, both on their website in a video that they made in the weekly newsletter from the school. How does a parent like myself go up against such a large entity when there seems to be so many people in the rank and file under the Archbishop that are so gung-ho about Common Core?
I have three main, one strategy and three tactics that I would offer you, Christina. The strategy is to understand that most bishops truly have never seen some of these texts. Their own eyes have not been on it. They have trusted their educational team, the superintendent, the curriculum specialist, who says, yes, we're in compliance, oh, this is fine, yes, there's a Catholic component. Most bishops have truly never seen the material. If they were to read some of these excerpts from some of these books, they would simply be horrified. So that is the strategy. The second is tactics. Three quick things. Start at the local level. Go to your pastor. He is the shepherd of those souls. You have that closest relationship with the pastor. Ask the pastor to speak with the principal and the bishop and to please get back to you. Always ask for them to get back to you, because it makes sure that something happens, even if they say, I didn't have much luck. It puts the ball in their court. The second tactic, get other parents. Show them the text. Start a blog and hand out the URL of your blog and say, all I'm putting on this blog are excerpts from the books or critiques of experts, such as there is a wonderful professor, Anthony Eslin, who is at Providence College, who's done a wonderful outline of why literature is being compromised. So start at that level. Pastor, get other parents, and then finally make sure that the bishop actually sees some of this work.
Excellent points, Mary Jo, and we're right down to the end. We're not going to be able to take any more calls today, but I am so happy that we're doing an entire series on this topic. And so, friends, we want you to watch for that. We'll put it out there to you. EWTN will put it out there to you when those shows are going to air. I want to thank you so much, Mary Jo, for your research, for being our guest today, for enlightening us on this very important topic that affects all of us broadly.
It does.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Johnnette.
Oh, it's great to be with you. And friends, we certainly do thank you for being with us. We don't take your presence here for granted. We do ask that God blesses you abundantly. Want to remind you about Women of Grace exclusive out there at womenofgrace.com. We'd love for you to take advantage of those archives. They're there for you. If you would like to have a copy of today's program and all of the programs that we will be doing in this series, you're going to be able to get them, and you can get them right through Religious Catalog. So we invite you to get out to Religious Catalog. Info is on the screen for you there. I really think that you can be an evangelist. I really do. And one way is to use these materials to inform others. That's fulfilling our divine mandate. Until we're together again, may God richly bless you. Bye-bye now.
Yes.